16.3, A Call for Freedom. So in this section, we're going to discuss the impact and the roles and contributions of African Americans during the Civil War. And so we had just finished up with 16.2 and the Battle of Antietam and the impact of that. So we pick right up with your study guide and looking at some of the responses here where it's talking about up here at the top where it's following the victory at Antietam, Lincoln decided to issue what, and then how would this take effect? So obviously the answer is the Emancipation Proclamation. So the essential questions here are, why was the Emancipation important and how is it going to change the war? So if we talk about cause and effect is just simply something that happens and then an event that happens in reaction to that. So when the Confederates decide to invade Maryland, they decide to invade the North and cross over into basically northern states that had not yet seceded, you have the Battle of Antietam occur on September 17, 1862, which of course, as we discussed, is the single bloodiest day in American history, which is of course very tragic and sad. But the positive effects of that is that Lincoln takes it as the victory that he needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. So in that proclamation, he basically is looking forward to changing the focus of the war. The war had started out as a war to bring the seceded states back in, to bring the Union back together. But as the war had drug on and had been not very successful to the North, Lincoln tried to find a reason for that. And he felt that slavery and slaves in general were helping the South to win this war. It was freeing up manpower to come and fight, and so he felt if he could somehow come up with something to weaken them, that would be very beneficial. And so the Emancipation Proclamation is issued September 22nd, 1862, just days after Antietam. So, as the proclamation says, slaves are freed in the rebelling states as of January 1st. Remember, Lincoln does not have the power to end slavery in the United States. That is protected by the Constitution. But being the president, he has immense new war powers to weaken his enemy, and he felt that this was the best way of doing it. So in doing that, he also keeps France and Britain out of our Civil War. So foreign countries withhold recognition of the Confederacy, one, due to them not being able to win the Battle of Antietam, and then secondly, the changing of the goal of the war. So if we look back at your sheet, you can sort of see right here is where the date would go. So January 1st, even though he issues it in September. And he hopes for word to go out amongst, obviously, the slaves throughout the South, and that word is passed basically by word of mouth. So the next part is very important because now, due to this, African Americans in the North, both freed and also runaways, want to serve in this conflict. They believe knowingly that it's about the condition of African Americans in the South, and they want to serve. So 200,000 will eventually serve, 38,000 as this shows you give their lives in the conflict. By the end of the war, 10% of the Army and 18% of the Navy are actually made up of African Americans. And so they are a crucial part of the Union war effort. We will come back to these three parts in a second. So here in this picture is actually Lincoln's wartime cabinet. Obviously you can see Lincoln right there. And around him, this would be his Secretary of State. And then this is the Secretary of War. And this man in the center is actually his Secretary of the Navy, the man who okayed the building of the USS Monitor, Gideon Welles, that he sometimes called Father Neptune because he felt that he had this kind of Poseidon type of look there. All right, so we can see these three questions here. So let's do this first one. So explain how the document's going to change the goal of the war. Remember, the first goal we discussed, to bring the seceded states back, about union, which people didn't really understand. But now that the war has shifted and he has issued this, basically what President Lincoln is saying is if and when the Union wins this war, it will end slavery in the United States forever. So that is huge. The war now takes on a much more moral tone to it. Why doesn't he issue it earlier? Well, there's a few reasons for that. So let's talk about it. So if you look here, this is Lincoln's views on slavery as the conflict had started. Basically, my paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union. It's not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. And many people were put off by this, but Lincoln was a politician at heart. And this was basically what he was saying, is I will do anything to save the country. So, why does he wait? Well, the first thing is he does not want to appear desperate. He wants to issue it after a win, not after a loss. He wants to be in a point of power and prestige, and the idea of doing it after a defeat does not give him that. So he's waiting for a battlefield victory. So that's why he issues it after Antietam. The other reason, he doesn't want to lose the border states. Remember, there are still slaves in those 4 border states, so the proclamation does not impact them. He cannot free those slaves in the border states. And if he did, he may encourage, if it happened earlier, states like Maryland that had a huge secession component in it to perhaps try and leave the Union. These pictures here just show you the actual Emancipation Proclamation down at the National Archives. This is an older picture dating back to 2006 when President W. Bush there. And then, of course, obviously President Obama. The impact of that proclamation so many years ago led to such a historic moment in 2008. Here Obama is honoring the 150th anniversary of the proclamation in 2013. And so other things throughout DC, of course, hopefully you've been to or are aware of the MLK Memorial. It's located right down in Washington, D.C., right across the tidal basin from the Jefferson Memorial right here. So talking about the impact and contributions of African Americans, we have to talk about the most famous African American regiment in the Union Army, known as the 54th Massachusetts. And they were the first all-volunteer, all-African American regiment in the Union Army. And in July of '63, so when we talk about the Battle of Gettysburg going on, the events that happen with the 54th is they are actually down in South Carolina, and the answer there, they are attacking a fort outside the city of Charleston is the answer for that. So here are things that should be in your notes. As we mentioned, they fought in and around Charleston. They were trying to take a fort known as Fort Wagner, and their commander, this man, Colonel Shaw, who was a veteran of Antietam, he had fought there before, he was picked to lead them. And the assault, they were in the lead, and they took heavy casualties, about 50%. Colonel Shaw himself was killed in action. If you're interested in it, the movie to see is Glory. It dates back to the 80s, but it is an excellent film, historically accurate, and also very important story to tell. The pictures here just would show, an artist rendering of Colonel Shaw mustering in his recruits of the 54th, and then this artist drawing that dates back to them trying to take Fort Wagner. So that is where we will end here with 16-3, A Call to Freedom.